Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show, featuring Lenny, only NFL podcasts, where one of the hosts is just sitting off camera saying, we're not talking about that, when people ask me how me and Lenny met. It's a beautiful story. I adopted him he was from Alabama. I'm Mina Kimes. Lenny is not next to me. It's Brett Kollmann. Lenny's in the corner, like I said. Brett, are you tired of talking NFL draft?
Surprisingly, no. And I think it's because everything went so wildly different than we've been talking about for 4 months leading up to it, that we get to like almost refresh our entire perspective on all these players and talk about fits, and like nothing went how we thought it was going to. Like even the top 3 didn't go how we thought it was going to go because of that wild trade up. So it's fun. It's fresh.
That's Brett Kollmann for the Bootleg Football Show, and also a million other places. We were talking about all the content he's doing. So if you want to listen to me talk about the trade, Ben Solak and I talked about the trade. We talked about the Browns. We talked about the Steelers. We talked about some drafts that we loved. I think Brett and I had a lot of crossover in that when we were kind of talking about this show. Today, we're going to talk about something that I didn't get a chance to get to on Monday, which is a couple things. First, we're going to talk about the quarterbacks in their new homes. So the quarterbacks who are likely to start. And I know that we can say right now, Jaxson Dart in the starting. I'm telling you, he's probably going to play, guys. I've seen this movie before. So I want to talk about specifically Cam Ward, Jaxson Dart, and Tyler Shough, who could potentially be starting for the Saints year one. Maybe a little bit about the Browns quarterback competition as well. And then in the second half, we're going to attack some of the other drafts and talk about the themes, perhaps. So drafts that had very strong messages, themes. So if you're listening to this and you're upset that I didn't get to your team's draft on Monday, there's a good chance we're going to get to it now. So let's start with the quarterbacks. The forgotten man of the NFL draft, the first overall pick. Nobody's talking about him. Now I feel like there's more clips about how nobody is talking about him than actually clips of people talking about Cam Ward. Brett Kollmann, this was it wasn't the least. There's been obvious 1-1 picks, but there was very little drama about the Tennessee Titans taking Cam Ward.
Yeah, and I think it's because, during the season, there was this debate on who QB1 in this class was, right? And then I think once the NFL media people got to dive into the college tape and we kind of were able to give our perspective on it, I think that's where really a consensus started to develop of like, nah, we watch Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar every Sunday. We know what tools you need to actually win in the NFL, and one of these guys has it, and one of these guys doesn't, quite frankly. And so consensus, I think, among NFL people solidified very quickly around Cam Ward, because at the end of the day, it's a tools league. If you want to fight monsters, you need monsters of your own, and Cam Ward was the monster in this class, and there was only one of them, unfortunately, compared to last year, and probably compared to next year. It was a light year, and the Titans are very lucky they got number 1 overall.
Everything you said being justified by the fact, by the way, that it was reported the week of the draft that the Giants very aggressively it was the Giants, correct? Right? Who tried to trade up. I don't think they were the only team, but that was the one. It's funny because I did these mock drafts all month long, pardon me, and I kept trying to get people to bite on a Giants trade. I think the one that Daniel Jeremiah finally accepted for Cam Ward was not too dissimilar from what they were reportedly offering, but we don't have to talk about why it was taken. It's very obvious. I want to talk about his situation. So I want to talk about the kind of offense that he could be in and Brian Callahan. But first, I want to talk about who is around him. So a big part of the reason why everybody's coalesced around Cam Ward going first overall and the Giants not either taking Carter or trading out, not just what you said, which is people actually watching his play and thinking through it, but what the Giants did in the offseason, right? Like they didn't take the quarterback and they spent a lot of money on their offensive line. So he's joining an offensive line with Dan Moore Jr., left tackle, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Kevin Zeitler, who they added, J.C. Latham, the receiving group. So this has changed a little bit. Calvin Ridley, Van Jefferson, Tyler Lockett was a late free agency signing, very reasonable deal. Treylon Burks. And then in the draft, late in the draft, they added Iona Moore, the big receiver out of Stanford, who was kind of a surprising faller, I would say. And then Xavier Restrepo, Cam Ward's teammate at Miami. Tight ends, Chig Okonkwo, I think I'm saying this right now, is their tight end one, but they also drafted Gunnar Helm out of Texas. And then the running back room is Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears. So what do you think of this group for Ward? All of it, everything I just said.
It's enough, I'll say, right? And I think,
Be
like,
honest.
is it a top tier, group of protection, a top tier group of weapons? No, but I would say it's like middle of the road ish, at least more so for the weapons than
Yeah.
offensive line. Offensive line last year, as far as offensive line pressure percentage allowed at 34.3%, that was 28th in the NFL. So like they needed to improve the offensive line. Even if I looked at the Dan Moore contract and I was like, you got to be kidding me. It was better than what they had. So even if they can get to like 19th, 20th as far as pressure percentage allowed, that's enough, right? And I think the weapons, the Lockett edition is super, super sneaky. So
Yeah.
I think they can be successful there. The difference between not the difference, one of the main differences between Cam Ward and Will Levis is Cam Ward will also throw some of the wildest interceptions you've ever seen in your life, but he's also good enough to dig him out of that hole, right? Will Levis, I think you got the low lows. You did not get nearly enough high highs.
Yeah.
And so it felt like one step forward, two steps back. Whereas Cam Ward, he's good enough and he's talented enough. And also, like, he does have long stretches where he just plays like a normal quarterback and does the Clark Kent stuff instead of the Superman stuff. And that's more like a 3-step forward, occasional one step
Yeah.
back, and then we're right back to taking 3 steps forward. So overall, he's going to learn some hard lessons his rookie year about what he can and can't get away with. Lessons that he also had to learn against Cal in that game, but he came back like repeatedly over and
Yeah.
over and over again. So he'll be fine.
I think so. You bring up the kind of the funny, I wouldn't say conundrum, but the interesting tension with Cam Ward as a quarterback is that he's actually like a pocket passer, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
he is. This is another reason why he went first overall. And I think I saw Brian Callahan talking about this, like emphasizing it. This is a pocket passing drop back quarterback, I believe was his quote. And Nate and I talked about his creativity from within the pocket. He's able to access all these unique arm angles and he can evade pressure and he can make both difficult throws and then also not difficult, both deep throws, but also he's an excellent RPO quarterback. You certainly saw that at Miami because of his ability. When the ball comes out quick and he's playing in structure, it looks really good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think as we think about Callahan and what he's going to want to do with him, you're right. Like a lot of the downsides are the two, just the doing too much plays, and it's going to be about sort of calibrating that playmaking ability with minimizing the risk taking and some of the bad dropbacks in a way that we saw Caleb Williams struggle with a little bit year one. But I have to think from just an offense standpoint, Callahan, he's gonna want it to look not totally dissimilar from Cincinnati, right? Like
Oh yeah.
he's gonna put him in
Yeah.
the gun, he's gonna spread things out, and he's gonna ask him to attack. I think my bigger concern for that is actually less Cam Ward and there's no Chase. This is not Chase Higgins. So even
Yeah.
if, like, you know what I mean? Like, because that offense in particular, you're really asking your receivers to win. And I think if I did have worries, I worry about Ward in terms of like some of the playmaking or the turnover stuff. But I am a little bit worried about this group not having like a true number one along those lines.
And I think, that's a concern for a bunch of teams around the league of, it's offense just looks easier when you have a top 10 receiver, whether it's an inside guy or an outside guy, because some teams their number one is the slot guy. Some teams it's a Z, some teams it's an X. Either way, having a top 10 guy helps so much because when you have that kind of threat, it dictates coverage structure. Teams get real uneasy about playing certain coverages or certain looks if it's going to give one of those top 10 guys a winnable one-on-one. Unless you have like Patrick Surtain, then you can get away with it. But most defenses don't have Patrick Surtain, just like most offenses don't have Jamar Chase. And it can be problematic for, let's say, uncreative offensive coaches if they don't have that number one to anchor their passing game around. However, there is something to be said if you have a point guard style quarterback like Cam Ward, who really his number one is just whoever's open. And you saw that at
Mhm.
Miami with Restrepo, with
Yeah.
the running backs, with Arroyo. Like his number one at any given time was just whoever was open, and he excelled really, I think, at working the intermediate area of the field, right, 10 to 20
Yes.
yards, similar to Joe Burrow. And so for me, I think this offense is going to be, at least this passing game is going to be a lot better than people think because in a way that you can anchor you can anchor your offense around where your number one's lined up. They're almost harder in some ways to prepare for because you don't know who the number one is going to be any given week or who the number one's going to be any given play because he's just going to take whatever you give him. And it almost kind of puts defenses into a catch-22 because there is no perfect coverage. There is no perfect front. You're always going to have a weakness somewhere. And Cam Ward is the type of quarterback that finds that weakness, similar to Joe Burrow. One receiver I would really keep an eye on, Chim DK, who I think was their 5th-round pick. He is really, really exceptional at running deep crossing routes, which is a lot harder of a route to run than you think because it's all about post-snap reads, seeing if it's middle field open versus middle field closed, where's the safety, where's the linebackers, where am I setting my line, what depth am I trying to get to, and then you have to hold that depth at full speed while looking the other direction and waiting for the ball to come, knowing you're probably going to get crushed on the other side of that thing. He was the best deep cross runner in all of college football. Like 70% of his production came on that route at Florida. And by the way, they want to run that a lot in Tennessee.
Yeah.
So I think they drafted him for a very specific reason. And he's the kind of guy who you're going to look up. He's going to have 3 catches for 90 yards out of nowhere. And he's going to be the number one for the week because they're playing against a defense that lets them do that.
I love that you highlighted, how he targets the intermediate part of the field because I mean, what I think there's a lot of things I liked about him in terms of the creativity, the arm talent, whatever, but just that intermediate middle part of the field, he's so aggressive about attacking it, whether it's, guys who are open off of play action or tight windows. In fact, between the numbers, I mean, he had easily the first highest QBR of any college football quarterback by quite a bit, 95. He also had 50 20-yard completions over the middle of the field too, which is the first of any quarterback. So I think, like, I'm looking at this group and I'm thinking, like, you talked about deep crossers. I'm wondering, like, who's going to win for him in that part of the
Mm-hmm.
field. I I sneakily like the Gunnar Helm pick as well.
Mm.
I mentioned him a little bit as just like a solid tight end. Really, he's not a freak athlete. There's a reason why he wasn't drafted in, first 3 rounds, but he's got great hands. And he's very different from Chig, right? Who's more of your playmaker. And I like the idea of them getting on the field together. I think this could be a sneaky fun 12 personnel offense, a lot of play action. I think if the offensive line is improved, that will help the run game too. So, kind of to put a bow on this group, it's legit, there's no dude, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of players who I think could be useful and useful particularly in the context of what we want from an offense with Cam Ward and Brian Callahan.
Yeah. It's a bunch of guys, but no dudes. But you can still win with a bunch of guys,
Yeah.
right? Buffalo did it.
Yeah. Well, they have
I
one
know they
dude,
got
and
Josh Allen.
he's
Yeah.
wearing number 17. Uh, yeah, so I'm excited to watch this. I think, the other thing I'll just add, kind of, I Cam Ward remind me a lot of Jordan Love. I'd like to see Callahan kind of lean into. It's a different offense. The Packers are much more about condensed formations and motion, but the way that they set up Love to attack aggressively the deep middle of the field and then the RPOs, I think there's some similarities, some through lines there in what you might see with him. Yeah, I don't know. I'm let's wrap here before we move on from Ward and Tennessee. If there's one thing you think that Brian Callahan has to do to set up Cam Ward, not for like maybe, big success, but to set him up, give him, I think, what he needs as a rookie quarterback, what do you think it would be?
Keep him on time, right? One of the big complaints
Yeah.
about Ward, beyond just the crazy turnovers that would just randomly happen every now and then, not often, but like they were crazy. Those really only happened when he wasn't on time. And so I would do everything in my power, whether it's using play action, using the RPO game, having my drop back pass game be more 3-step stuff than 5-step stuff. Like really do a good job of sinking his feet to whatever concept is called. And, some OCs I think are better at this than others where they'll call a route concept, and sometimes I feel like the drop that is called for is too deep for that concept or not deep enough for that concept. And the timing is off. That's what causes quarterbacks to, have to hitch more than they need to because whatever concept is called, like I feel like it's not open fast enough for the drop that is called for. And some coaching staffs I think have a really good feel for exactly what kind of drop and what kind of action needs to be paired with the particular route concept. Sean McVay, obviously, I think is Andy Reid. Like you go through all the top offensive coaches, a lot of it is they're really good at timing, like building the
Yeah.
timing into the play. And so I think that should be, job number one for this Titans coaching staff is make sure the timing is dialed in for everything from a conceptual standpoint and a mechanical standpoint, because that's going to help Ward, cut out those turnovers.
Yeah, I think the Caleb Williams rookie year is really going to be instructive for this. I know
Yeah.
they're different quarterbacks, but you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
similar, because the way we talk about Ward, there are similarities to how we talked about Caleb, where we were like, damn, when he plays on time in college, it looks great, right? Question is, can you get him to play on time? And sometimes they could, and a lot of times they couldn't. And to your point, I think you could say this about any rookie quarterback, but I think this one in particular, good things happen when Cam Ward plays fast.
Yeah.
So keep him playing fast. Jaxson Dart. Okay, so the New York Giants. We're going to talk a little bit about the rest of their draft later, I believe. But let's focus on the Dart offense part because the rest of the draft was very defensive outside of Cam Scatterbo. So the Giants, he walks into this situation. He is obviously behind Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston on the depth chart, or whatever. The offensive line, they really are running it back, right? So
Hmm.
Thomas, Runyon, Schmitz, Van Roten, Illuminor. Receiving group also pretty much running it back. Neighbors, Slayton, Wandale. They got Jalen Hyatt still, Zach Pascal. The tight ends. Okay, so everything's running it back. Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger. The backs, Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary. The big difference is they got him Cam Scatterbo, weapon. Before we get to the offense and what it should look like for Jaxson Dart, how do we feel about this situation? How do we feel about the offensive group surrounding him? Because I feel like this has kind of been overlooked as everybody's been raving about the Giants draft. And yeah, there's some issues here.
Well, the offensive line was improved last year in one category, and that's yards before contact per carry,
Yeah.
which was 1.3. That was 12th best in the NFL, compared to, I think, a couple of years ago, they were literally dead last in Saquon's last year, which is why Saquon got the hell up out of there because he was
Yeah.
tired of getting hit in the backfield. However, I brought up that pressure percentage allowed was 28th for the Titans. It was 29th for the Giants. They still could not pass protect. And I get it. Like they sustained some injuries. Like, yes, that's going to happen with every single offensive line. They still struggle with pass protection. And so what I really worried about for Jaxson Dart, who is a tough evaluation to begin with because so much of their offense was play action based and RPO based, when they actually have to drop back and pass behind that offensive line, whether it's a 5-man protection, 6-man, 7-man, if it's non-play action, non-RPO, and they got to drop back and pass behind that offensive line, and it's, I'll be honest, relative, the relative pressure he's going to face in the NFL is more than what he faced in college. What happens there? Like, we haven't really seen Jaxson Dart under those circumstances because Lane never let him be in those circumstances at Ole Miss. So, like, it's a big question mark for me. I'm not saying he's going to fail. It's just
Yeah.
something we've never seen.
The offensive line is something that I feel like has gotten under discussed here. So you threw out some metrics: 26 in pass block win, which is the ESPN metric for pass protection. So what's been brought up a bit is Brian Dable working with Josh Allen, right? This is his calling card as a coach. Hey, look what he did with
Yeah.
Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And there's some lessons there when we get to the scheme part of this that I want to talk about. But I think what people forget is Josh Allen, first of all, it took him 2 years to become Josh Allen, which is, it's a lesson also in patience, obviously. he had, like, the athleticism to kinda get through those 2 years and showed some improvement, but it was really in 2020. The Bills' offensive line in 2020 was 4th in pass block win. The Bills' offensive line is like the quiet hero of the entire Josh Allen story that everybody forgets. Obviously, they also traded for Diggs, and Gabe Davis was playing well at the time, but it was such a big part of his development. And so I do worry. I see this playing out. Russell Wilson starts, he takes a zillion sacks. They get tired of him. They find a soft spot in the schedule. Maybe they play a crappy team. Dart comes in, looks fine. But then when they start going up against real pass rushers, I do worry a lot about this. He made some really tough throws under pressure, but he also dropped his eyes a lot. And I just worry not only about like Dart and success this year, but I worry about developing bad habits, behind a bad offensive line. Pass catchers, we know Neighbors is a superstar. Run game is good. It's not a great group beyond that. Just not.
It's top heavy, right? The top is really good. Like it's really,
Malik
really
Neighbors
good.
rocks, yeah.
It- but there's a lot of question marks after. Like I think Darius Slayton is a solid 2, right? And I like the Scatterbo pickup, but
Great pass catcher.
I'll be honest though, it's like I had a higher grade on Tyrone Tracy coming out than I did on Cam Scatterbo, and that's no disrespect to Cam Scatterbo, but do I think he's going to supplant Tyrone Tracy?
No.
I really don't.
Tracy's good also.
Tracy's
Tracy is,
good.
like, really good, yeah.
So again, it's not like the ideal situation for a quarterback to go into, but it's not as bad as it was a couple years ago. So I'll give them credit for that. Honestly, the best part about Dart going to the Giants is I think their defense is going to be so good that even if he makes mistakes, I think the margin for error is going to be greater.
We'll get to that defense. Yeah, you said that to me, and I took a second, I looked at the depth chart, and I went, "Whew,
Dude, it's nuts.
okay."
It's crazy.
Okay, but we will get to that, Giants fan. So if you're listening to this and you're like, "Stop talking about the offensive line, talk about our awesome defense, our draft picks there." We will get to that. The offense itself. So, Dable, he's done different things with different quarterbacks that I think worth stressing here. What it became with the Bills and Josh Allen, where he was really spreading things out for him, um, was different from what he did with Daniel Jones, which was the Daniel Jones offense. I think about not this last the in 2022 when they made it to the playoffs,
Hmm.
highest, fifth highest, pardon me, play action rate in football. Constantly rolling him out, cutting the field in half, zone read. I actually think there's a lot in there that would help out with that Jaxson Dart year 1.
I think they're going to lean heavily into it. If I recall off the top of my head, their bootleg percentage in that year with Daniel Jones was like
Yeah.
10% higher than the second place team. Like they really leaned into cutting the field in half. And that will kind of be familiar, honestly, to Dart because Lane did that a lot too. It was, we're lining up on the boundary and or on the hash, and keep in mind, college hash marks are wider. So it's in the college game, which is an entirely different sport because of this. The RPO rules are different. Offensive linemen can climb to 3 yards instead of 1. You have a very constricted boundary and a wide open field side. So a lot of it was, based on the pre-snap look, we're either working the boundary or we're working the field. The RPOs worked really, really well because the offensive lineman could basically get away with what in the NFL is ineligible man downfield. And even then, college refs give them like a 5-yard grace period. So it's a wildly different sport that Jaxson Dart's running into. And that's why I think, to your point, he's going to run a lot of bootlegs to cut the field in half so he doesn't have to look at as much stuff, right?
He's such a good athlete too. If you run nakeds with him, he is more than. I mean, that's why I keep going to Daniel Jones. And again, Giants fans are like, "How dare you compare it?" I'm not comparing you to Daniel Jones the player. I'm not going to say that he's going to have the same trajectory. But as an athlete, allow us this: Daniel Jones, he's a good athlete, and
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the stuff they did with both in terms of the nakeds and also some of the designed runs, they can absolutely do that with Jaxson Dart year 1.
Yeah.
It would be a disservice to him if his athleticism, which was honestly one of my favorite things watching him, is not baked heavily into this offense.
The goal is to just get first downs,
Yeah.
right? The best way to avoid
They were
third
good at it in
down.
2022.
Yeah, they were really good at it. They stayed out of third down, right? Because they were so explosive on first and second down with Saquon and Daniel Jones. Like they didn't put themselves into 3rd and 8 because they were so good at converting on 2nd down. Like, you have to do that again. And obviously, if your offensive line is top 12 in the NFL in terms of running the ball, you might as well do that a lot. And then hopefully defenses get so tired of that, they go into cover 3. And then, Malik Neighbors crosses the face of the safety. We hit the deep post for a touchdown, go back to the bench, let the defense work. Like, that's the goal here. It's not likely to be a formula to be a contender this year, but they might be good enough so that nobody gets fired. And I think at the moment, that is what their goal is. Like, let's not get fired.
If you can get that 2022 level of offensive, like that offense was unbelievably efficient. I mean, they were like top 10 in just about every metric. There's a reason why they gave Daniel Jones that contract. If they can get that level of efficiency, as you were talking about, everything you're describing is really similar to what they did. That gives you the one that you, like you said, nobody gets fired. 2, you can start building off of that for next year with Dart as he improves as a processor, as you can make complicate the offense a little bit. So yeah, I think there is a blueprint there, and I think also, yeah, I'm just worried about the offensive line, and I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, Tyler Shough. I'm so excited for America to learn how this man's name is pronounced, because it's going to create some of the most amazing first take chyrons. If the Saints are at all relevant, shuck around and find out.
Oh, yes.
Shuck it. There's just a million good and bad ways you can go here.
Shuck my life, yeah.
What the shuck? Okay, Tyler Shough. So the Saints. Nobody knows what's going on with Derek Carr right now. God knows, according to his sermon, I guess. But he obviously, there's been a lot of reports about his injury. So that's why we're talking about Tyler Shough. There is a good chance Tyler Shough is your week 1 starter. So we're going to talk about it like he is. New Orleans Saints. So one thing I love is they didn't take him in the first round. They improved their offensive line. So he instantly walks into a better situation. And by the way, I love that New Orleans did that. I want to start there. I love that they drafted. I don't think I talked about this pick. I really liked that they drafted Banks with the 9th overall.
Oh, yeah.
That was a great pick.
That's their best pick.
So the offensive line, I guess it'll be Banks on the left side, Fuanga in his college position on the right side. Interior, you got Radun, Spikoy, Ruiz. Receiving group, Olave, if he's healthy, is your wide receiver 1. They added Brandon Cooks, Shaheed. That's a fast group. Put a pin in that. Tight ends, Juwan Johnson, who they extended, Foster Moreau, and then the backs. I actually missed this in real time. They added Devin Neal, which I thought was kind of an interesting pick behind Alvin Kamara. I kind of liked that. So yeah, you got a little bit of youth in this group around him. It looks a little bit different from last year. Again, we can talk about the offense with Kellen Moore in a second, but just focusing on the pieces around him, how do you feel about this group, especially compared to the ones we just talked about?
I think as a group, you can absolutely excel with this, right? They got a lot of speed. If you have a big arm quarterback and an offensive coach that's willing to call 4 verts as much as humanly possible, like, you can absolutely make hay with this. And I think their offensive line is improved enough that it can hold up. And people forget, weeks 1 and 2 last year, when the offensive line was healthy, like, they were unbelievable. They're the best offense in football for 2 weeks. And then everybody got hurt and just completely went away. But I love the Banks pick. I think he is their future right tackle, but you got Penning there this year, and I don't think Penning is going to be there long term. And so if I had to guess, like, I know the depth chart right now.
Wanga might play left, and then
I kind of feel like their best 5 is Banks left guard, Penning right tackle, Fuaga left, unless they get to camp and they realize, like, we really need to put Banks at tackle. Like, again, we'll see. I think they're gonna jumble it around, but the reason they took Banks is because he can do both.
Yeah.
Right. But I do think, like, a left side of Fuaga and Banks and McCoy, baby, like, you're cooking. Like, you're absolutely cooking. So I would love that. But if they need to make him tackle, that's totally fine too. Either way, he was their best pick. He was one of the best offensive linemen at any position in this class. He was absolutely worth that pick. I know Saints fans were hoping for something else, but like I was ecstatic for them when that came through. And then, did they take Shough earlier than I would have taken him? Yes, but at the same time, if your quarterback's shoulder is annihilated and you need something besides Spencer Rattler for this season, I can understand it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
I still think if this team is really bad this season, I'm not saying they will be, but if this team is really bad this season and they're in position to, like, let's say draft Arch Manning, Tyler Shuck's not going to stop me from doing that,
Yeah.
right? This could be like a Jimmy Clausen type thing. So I like the protection. I like the weapons. They are thin. They're not really insulated from injury. But as far as starting 11 goes, like you could work with this.
If Olave is healthy, then I feel pretty good about it. If he's not, this is a very bad receiver group. But if it's the three that I laid out, yeah, it's fun. Olave can work all three levels. He's obviously, Shahid's your speed guy. Cooks is also your speed guy. But like if it's Cooks, Shaheed, and I actually don't have their depth chart in front of me. Whoever's behind them, you're really missing somebody who can work the short and intermediate parts of the field. But if Lavi's playing, I like the Nevin Neal siding too. I think, and Nate Tice was really high on him. Zone running back makes sense in this game, makes sense backing up Kamara, giving some much needed youth, and you can kind of spell Kamara a little bit. I am interested in what Kellen Moore thinks of Tyler Shough. Because so Moore has worked with a lot of different types of quarterbacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going from, Dak and Herbert, some similarities there, and then wildly different type of offense in Philadelphia. It was kind of interesting because he kind of, he maintained the same DNA. It was still a power spread offense built with QB run and a decent RPO component, but he sort of added his twist on it, put them under center a little bit more, a little bit of motion. I don't know about you, Brett, but like watching Shough, I thought, okay, this is like more so than really a lot of the other prospects. I thought, oh yeah, you can put this guy under center and like run a NFL offense with him. What do you think Moore's approach is going to be with him, given his skill set?
I think he's going to try to limit pressure as much as humanly possible through lining him up under center, using hard play action fakes, doing a lot of the stuff that he did in the back half of last year with the Eagles, right? Because if you're looking at the first 6 games or so in Philly, it was very much a carryover of the offenses that they had before. They were very shotgun centric. Didn't really put Jalen under center at all. They were very vertical as far as, we're going to run go routes down the boundary and take our shots. And it felt like Kellen Moore wasn't able to put his stamp on the offense quite yet. And then we got about a month and a half into the season. Things had started off kind of rocky in Philly anyway. And all of a sudden you started seeing Jalen go more under center. They started calling more outside zone, which had been part of the Kellen Moore DNA going back, his last 2 stops.
Yeah.
And they cut AJ Brown's go route usage down by like 40%. They were having him do other stuff. And I know there was a dip in AJ Brown's production, but they were using him differently in order to make the overall offense a lot more effective. They weren't just saying like, you're the vertical guy and you're not going to do anything else. And all of a sudden the Eagles offense exploded, and it didn't stop exploding until they won the Super Bowl. So kind of seeing that from Kellen, I think it kind of reaffirmed for him that going under center is good. Hard play action fakes are good. Outside zone is good. And I think that, that's part of the reason why I thought, okay, maybe they put Banks at guard, because when they were super outside zone centric early on in the year in New Orleans last year was when they were putting up 45 points a game. So I look at that, and then I look at the Tyler Shough fit. And if you're looking at just play action throws from him, he was 13th just in this quarterback class as far as passer rating off play action. If you're looking at no screen, no RPO, no play action, straight drop back passing, especially under pressure, straight drop back passing, which is really what matters most, he was 11th in passer rating. So all that to say, I don't know what you do with this because I think he really only works if he is completely clean, if he is not under pressure and
Yeah.
then making the wildest decisions you have. Like, you think Cam Ward's interceptions were crazy. Like, some of the decisions that Tyler Shough made under pressure this year are unbelievable. Like,
So
no idea what he was
I
doing.
I'm a little higher on him, I think, than you. And I will say, watching him, I felt like a lot of his numbers were his receivers stunk. So,
Yeah.
maybe that's a little harsh, but,
He had Ja'Cory, and that was about it, right?
so I do think his numbers were a little bit suppressed by his circumstances. I think you look at him kind of like as Derek Carr, honestly, but, like, what if Derek Carr was more athletic? It's that's sort of I mean, in terms of, like, Derek Carr, big-armed quarterback, great off of play action. I know you're talking about Chuck's numbers, um, but then there's no willingness to move, right? It's never and I think with Chuck, you really don't have to change it up that much from what they were doing with Derek. And you do have these receivers who will get downfield in a hurry. He's got a really good arm. So
Yeah.
I think to your point, like whether or not he succeeds is just going to come down to whether or not he's under a lot of pressure. Bad things happen when Tyler Shuck's under pressure, or he just throws away the ball like a
I
lot.
would take throwaways,
Yeah.
but that's also why they
So
drafted offensive line first,
it's
is so
funny
that
though.
he wouldn't be.
Yeah, he doesn't take a lot of sacks though, which is interesting. He would much rather just throw it away. So anyways, I think you look at it through that lens, like, hey, this is just kind of like a younger, more athletic Derek Carr. Um, and I think you kind of proceed from there. But yeah, a lot of his success is gonna come down to whether or not I think that offensive line takes the step forward from the last two draft classes because they've invested now two top 10 picks, a tackle or guard. Okay, this is kind of like, let's see, right? Like, let's see if those
Yeah.
worked out. I like that they did that, frankly. I like that they did that last year. I like they did it this year. Um, really
I'll
quickly.
also say he had the
Okay.
4th highest average time to throw as well, so gotta get it out quicker too.
Yeah, well, that's all these guys.
Yeah.
Watching these quarterbacks makes me such a boomer. I'm just like, stay in the pocket and throw the ball. Okay. So really quickly with the Browns, because I don't even know how to approach this conversation because it's the most insane quarterback room of all time. The way I thought, though, I wanted to talk to you about it was again the situation, and then this is how I wanted to position it: Dylan Gabriel versus Shador Sanders.
Mhm.
Who's a better fit for this offense? Because unlike these other teams, well, certainly the Kellen Moore aspect of it, we know what a Kevin Stefanski offense looks like. We know what he wants it to look like. So I think there's actually you can have like an interesting discussion about who is a better fit. But first we should talk about the situation really quickly. Whew, this receiving group. Whew. Judy, Tillman, Thrash.
Yes.
They drafted Harold Fannin Jr., who joins Dave Njoku. They drafted two running backs, Quinshawn Jenkins and Dylan Sampson, both of whom I like. Offensive line is Dewan Jones, Petonio, Posich, Teller, Conklin. They assigned Kevin Jenkins. This is not a good offense, man. Like, this
And I
is,
think that's also why they didn't
yeah,
draft a quarterback high,
yeah.
because like, who's gonna succeed with this?
But they also could
Honestly.
have a receiver. Did he really have to take two running backs? Could have drafted an offensive lineman. I don't understand their draft, whatever.
I think taking the 2 running backs is a signal of like, we will run the ball 40 times a game, whether it's working or not, because we have to. Like, that will be their identity.
I wrote build. I wrote this is almost like kind of the Niners in 20. I was trying to come up with the years. Definitely pre CMC Niners. Like I think they're going for let's just get like some big bodies on the field, add to running backs and tight ends. It's going to be a wide zone run game. Although Sampson is, I mean, it's a different. Maybe I don't know. But maybe they're going to mix it up. Play action off of that. Um, Yeah, I wouldn't feel great about any of these quarterbacks slotting in here, to be honest.
I will say, if Gabriel is playing, and I don't know if he will be, you almost have to do a bootleg heavy game plan for him so he can see. Because I was out there at the Elite 11 last summer before Gabriel's last year in college, and he was one of the counselors at Elite 11, and he was going through a throwing session. I thought he was one of the high school kids. I was like, man, this kid's like
He's
17
small.
years old. He's spinning. He's got a great ball, and it's like, oh no, that's Dylan Gabriel. I was like, oh god, like he is not a large human being, and his center is 6'6", his left tackle 6'8", his right tackle 6'6". Like he's not gonna be able to see over these guys. So like they will have to roll him out a lot so that he has vision down the field. And like I think he throws a good ball. I really do. He's just really, really, really small, like outlier small, even more so than Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Like I at
He's
least
a little,
Kyler's got freakish athleticism, you know?
yeah, that's the issue with Gabriel because like it looks good when he throws like
Yeah.
and I will say like this situation, this offense is what I envisioned for him as a developmental prospect or backup. You know, play action heavy, boot heavy, you spelled it out. It makes a lot of sense. Like if they had drafted Dylan Gabriel in the 5th round, I would have been like, yeah, perfect sense. Shador is it's interesting because I think there's a lot of divide about whether his fit in this type of offense. There's aspects of it that do make sense. He's obviously, well, obviously, apparently, he's accurate. He's accurate throwing to the middle of the field. And I think that would be where he has an edge over Gabriel. I think he sees the middle of the field better, and the ball is he sets up receivers to get yards after the catch. The problem is he just holds on to the damn ball, right?
Mhm.
So, I think you call the offense is the offense. Whether or not either of these guys will have success in it is just going to come down to um, whether Sanders can play faster and take fewer sacks, and if Gabriel's totally allergic to the middle of the field. Because if he is, it won't work.
I really do think that Shador is gonna play at some point, right? Because looking at the quarterback room, like Joe Flacco is not going to stop me from seeing what we have in Shador. Neither is Kenny Pickett. You know, whoever is the best rookie throughout the offseason between Gabriel and Shador, that'll be QB3. And honestly, I think they probably carry both Gabriel and Shador because you're not going to waive either one of them if you only want to carry three quarterbacks. So honestly, it's a competition between Flacco and Pickett to be the starter, and then you carry the two rookies, and then either Flacco or Pickett probably get jettisoned around training camp or traded or whoever. And then you got the two rookies that battle it out for QB2 and QB3, but I'd be willing to bet that both of them play and they see what they have. And it's just unfortunate that they're behind an offensive line that is much older and much less effective than it used to be, with weapons that are not in the top three quartiles in the league. So it's a tough environment to also see what you really have in these kids, but they're gonna do it because they need to know going into next offseason where they have 2 first-round picks and might make a play for another quarterback. But like they have to get both of them playing time to get an accurate look of what they are.
I'll be positive about the Browns for one moment. I do love this as a landing spot for both Judkins and Fannett Jr., right? I mean, you
Mhm.
see the vision I talked about, maybe better than rather than the Niners, I would compare it a little bit more to like the Cardinals last year. Like they're just going to put a bunch of tight ends on backs of the field and try to play big boy football. And Fannin was such a unique prospect, most productive tight end receiver in college football last year. Very unusual body type. My hope for him was to land somewhere where with a coach who was going to be creative next to a more traditional tight end, which is exactly, I think the potential for them here. The backs pair well together. I liked both of them a lot. So as much as I do not like this receiving group, the tight end and backs group is fun. And you could zig here a little bit or zag. The NFL zigs, you zag. So Browns fans, if you're listening to this and you're saying, you hear me kind of questioning it, I do like those players, and I do think Kevin Stefanski will find interesting ways to use them. So just wanted
And
to
we've
say
seen
something.
elite offenses build out of tight ends and slot receivers
Yeah,
before. So we'll
possible.
see.
All right, let's take a quick break, come back, and talk about some non-quarterbacks and some teams with interesting drafts. Okay, we're back. So this is going to be teams who had thematically resonant drafts, teams who are trying to tell us something with what they drafted. I'll go first. San Francisco 49ers. Who boy do they want to stop the run? uh, this is the team that last year was 23rd in run DVOA defense. They were 10th versus the pass, but they were 28th in EPA per carry against the run. They struggled in short yardage. They struggled with tackling. So in the first 2 rounds, they took Michael Williams, the edge out of Georgia, which is a little bit of a surprising pick. And then in the second round, they took Alfred Collins, who I did talk about a little bit in my defensive draft pod, is a mountain of a man out of Texas. Michael Williams, Brett, I had questions about his upside as a pass rusher, but I believe he is a phenomenal run defender. And it seems to me that was very much a concern for the San Francisco 49ers headed into this draft.
It was the concern, right? Because especially if you're looking at the identity of this team, anytime they've been successful over the last, I don't know, since 2017, anytime the Niners have been good, it's because they've owned the line of scrimmage, in particular on early downs. Whether it's running the ball successfully or stopping the run successfully, they own the line of scrimmage. That is what they've been known for. And they have really, really let that slip on the defensive side of the ball over the last couple of years. And some of that was injury. Some of that was players getting older. I get it. Yeah. They had some attrition. First they traded away Buckner, and then they replaced him immediately with a draft pick that didn't end up being as good as DeForest Buckner. Armstead's gone. They took some swings in free agency that didn't quite work out. And you just kind of saw the defensive line slip in quality year after year after year. And so they said, we're done. Bob Saleh's back in town. He wants to stop the run. So he said, give me 3 picks on this front to stop the run. And they did it. Like 3 of their first, I think, 5 picks between Michael, Alfred Collins, and CJ West. And I have a fun CJ West stat for you. And this just kind of tells you what their mentality is. Indiana's average depth of tackle against A-gap runs last year, CJ West was the Indiana nose tackle, was just 2.11 yards. The next closest team in all of college football was 2.75. They faced only 85 A-gap runs the entire year, which was 104th in the country, and yet they were 4th in tackles for loss or no gain on those runs at 29. CJ West is there to stop the run. Alfred Collins is there to stop the run. Michael is there to stop the run. Because if they can get you into 3rd and 7, Nick Bosa will do the rest.
Alfred Collins, I've not seen him in person, but I would very much like to. That dude.
Oh, he's gigantic. Oh my God.
And in Texas, he was the nose, but he played cross gaps. But I mean, I gotta think they're asking him to 2 gap. They're asking him, like, he is immovable. I don't know how much upside he gives you as a rusher. This is not Dexter Lawrence, but he is truly being brought in to do a job here. Mm-hmm. And Williams too. I don't want to skip over the 1st round pick. I really loved his run defense. It was my favorite thing watching him. That he can just set an edge. I have, again, also questions about him as a pass rusher. And I think that's why if he was a bit more of a pass rusher, he would have been a no-brainer top 10 pick. But I don't mind him where they took him. I wish the Niners had addressed the offensive line, I will say, over the whole draft. But I did think that as far as themed draft goes, this was a fun one. All right, who's yours?
I got to start with the Giants, right? And
okay. Giants fans, here we go. Here is the praise you have been seeking. Let me pull up my all the picks, because you got to talk about the whole draft here.
And I want to list off their depth chart in the front 7, because yes, they took Jaxson Dart, Scatabo, Marcus Mbo is going to be an interior for them. Thomas Fidone, by the way, sleeper at tight end. Jim Harbaugh was recruiting him extremely heavily. Unfortunately, had some knee injuries, so there's medical flags, but he's like a 9'4" RAS guy, freak athlete. Also took on Tyleik Williams in the hole and won. So like he blocks his butt off. Like I probably should have brought him up when we were talking offense, but like they did have good picks on offense. But on defense, here's your depth chart on the defensive line. You got Abdul Carter and Brian Burns at your edge. You got Dexter Lawrence, Rakeem Nunez-Noches, Roy Robertson-Harris, Darius Alexander, who's their third-round pick. By the way,
Such
fourth
a good pick.
highest
I
pressure
like
rate
that.
among all
Oh my god.
interior in this class. Like DJ Davidson. At linebacker, you got Bobby Okereke, Micah McFadden, Darius Muasau, who they took late last year. And then they got Paulson Adebo, Javon Holland, Tyler Newman, Deontay Banks, and Drew Phillips as your secondary. That's a defense, folks. Like, I get it. The offense is going to be really, really hit or miss this year, but they just got to get to 21 points. Because
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be really easy to get over 20 against that. Hell, you might just get 17. That's how good they're going to be.
Dexter Lawrence eating up double team. Like, okay, so if you're an offense, you're looking at this. Shoot, I mean, like, what if they did like a NASCAR pack? You didn't even mention Kayvon. Like, what if you get Kayvon on the? I mean, they might trade him when you, but if you're like an offense, the first person you worry about when you play the New York Giants is Dexter Lawrence. First person you worry about, right? So you're double teaming Dexter Lawrence, and then you got these freaking demons rushing off the edge. I mean, I truly believe they have the ability to be. Texans are still over them, but top 3 pass rush in football with this group. I really believe that.
It's going to be a cold November night in MetLife, 3rd and 7, lining up against those 4. Are you super confident you're going to be able to block that?
Carter could not be in a better. I mean, getting to play with this group is just an unreal situation for him. The battles between them and the Eagles' offensive line are going to be absolutely incredible. Yeah, I'm super stoked to watch this. Giants defense last year, there were some injuries. Obviously, Lawrence too missing some pretty significant amount of games. If I had to question one thing, I want to see, they've still got Deontay Banks penciled in as a starter. Can you bring him back as a player that I was high on as a prospect? Obviously, has not lived up to the potential, but I love them bringing in Adebo and Holland too. Yeah, I mean, it's a great group. And to your point, like when we talk about supporting rookie quarterbacks playing, I mean, it is funny, right, that Russell Wilson is there because like as a rookie, like there's some, as a rookie, when you think about him with the Seattle Seahawks, there could be some similarities between that situation. Not to be like this Giants are the 2012 Legion of Boom or anything, but in terms of like a build that's like defense focused, run game, play action, there's definitely some through lines there. Okay.
There is a way, sorry to go on a tangent here, but you made me think about it. There is a way for defense to account for offensive yardage, and it's by granting your offense a better average starting field position. If you're getting a bunch of punts forced and your quarterback is starting at the 35-yard line, the 40-yard line, instead of their own 20 over and over again, that might as well just be offensive yardage. So it really does count.
The Miami Dolphins draft.
Mm-hmm.
We're beating the lightweight allegations. Literally, the combined weight of their first 3 draft picks is 967 pounds. Added it up for you. Did some math. Kenneth Grant, pick 13. They took Savanea, the Arizona guard. He's going to play guard for them in the second round. Jonas Savanea, sorry. And then Jordan Phillips, who's another Jordan Phillips, come on. But is a Maryland defensive tackle. We can talk about sort of whether those picks made sense, what they're getting out of them, etc. But this to me feels like Chris Greer saying, all right, you're all making fun of us for drafting these like light, fast people and being a lightweight team that can't play in January. I'm going trenches. I'm going with the big dudes. And boy, did they.
I talked to both Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips at Shrine Bowl. And Kenneth Grant is just a wonderful human. I think Dolphins fans are going to adore him. He's great. Jordan Phillips, at 20 years old, had a new personal record on the bench of 495, which was like 5 pounds off Aaron Donald. And he squatted 705. So young man can lift. He is extremely stout. I know he doesn't look that big, but it's because he's so dense. Like he's built like a power lifter. You put him next to Kenneth Grant, Benito Jones, Zach Seiler. Like this Miami defense already was best in the NFL last year in terms of average yards before contact allowed per carry. Like they were already fairly stout on the line of scrimmage. They're even better now.
Yeah.
Like they are going to be dominant on the line of scrimmage. And then Jonas Savaiinaia, I loved that pick. I thought he could have gone back into first round. We're talking about a guy who had 92nd percentile 10-yard split. He's got almost 34-inch arms at 324, played left tackle and right tackle. Sometimes in the same game, you're putting him in a guard where you can just maul people. Like, I
Yes.
love that pick.
So
It's
as a
great.
guard, I love him as a guard. I watched him a fair amount because I watched a lot of Arizona. And you definitely had some struggles in space as a tackle, but as a guard, Mauling is right. He's big and nasty, and I really, really like them. Like I like them in that second. I actually probably that might be my favorite pick of theirs, to be honest. I love
Mhm.
Kenneth Grant, and unlike the other defensive tackles we talked about, Collins, Williams, he does give you pass rush upside. 13 is a little rich, a little rich. I was a little bit surprised by that one, but everything you said is correct. Like I do think, this is Dolphins defensive line surprisingly good last year. You talked about the performance against the run, but I do think that there was a need at defensive tackle, obviously with Wilkins gone, and I like him a lot as a player. I do.
You got to go up against,
Yeah.
Baltimore, Buffalo, KC late in the season. You have to be able to win with toughness because speed is only going to do so much in like 20-degree weather. So this was a step in the right direction.
He's such a Baltimore player too, as you mentioned that, like
Hmm.
Kenneth Grant. He just had a kind of a Ravensy feel. He's a really good player. I do. If it was 2005, like I said, he would be going. No question about that. Okay, next team for you.
So this was really, really tough for me to decide between all the AFC West teams because literally the entire AFC West was four of my top six draft classes. But I'm going to go with the Chargers. I'm going to be a homer here. They ate their vegetables last year with the Joe Alt pick. They've invested in the offensive line as all Jim Harbaugh teams are going to do. And then this year they went weapons. They went weapons, 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 weapons over and over and over again. And I loved every single pick. Omarion Hampton is going to be a star in LA. The Trey Harris pick I thought was very underrated. I love him as an X receiver that can play outside, be a ball winner. He's also really underrated as a yak threat too, about 8.5 yards after the catch per reception. They took Keandre Lambert Smith, who I have no idea why Penn State let him walk out the door because he's just this acrobatic, catches everything kind of receiver outside, like a true vertical threat, great ball skills. And then Oronde Gadsden the second, captain choice route himself, really athletic, not the biggest tight end, but I see him more as like their Isaiah Likely. If I was going to, do like a comp for a role, he's going to be their Isaiah Likely, their tight end that operates a lot in space, use him as like a move blocker, get him involved in the screen game. Like they finally got weapons, right? And the offensive line, I don't want to say it's complete.
So I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah, because so Ben and I got into a little bit about Hampton versus Golden. I think Hampton's going to be good. I get the pick. I would have taken Golden, but I think that's going to be a fun player thing. It plays out because the Packers and the Chargers are picking right there. But I did want to ask you about how you feel about the interior of this offensive line, because when I think about the Chargers, the way their season ended, um, it was such a nightmare and it was such an underrated thing, right? Because everybody was like, oh, they invested so much in the offensive line. They're really good, but they were not good. They were very, very bad at the end. And so they signed Mekhi Becton, but you're still looking at Zion Johnson on the inside, who's their first round pick from a couple of years ago, Bradley Bozeman. Do you feel like they should have added to the line?
Yes, I really do. And I think it was just like how the board fell.
Yeah.
I think there was a couple guys that went earlier than they thought they would. Like I thought they were going to be a prime spot for like Tate Ratledge. And I think it's just where Ratledge went. It just wasn't the exact right timing for them. And so like, all right, we'll just keep taking weapons over and over again. And there are other ways to address interior offensive line. I could see them making a move this offseason to try to bring one in. But at the same time, I would have been more comfortable if they just spent like one more pick on a guard. Like just one would have made me feel a little bit better about it. But who knows? They might still really believe in Zion Johnson and Bradley Bozeman. The Andre Carter or the Andre, not Andre Carter, Andre James signing didn't move me because like he was their issue with the run game last year in Vegas, and they moved JPJ to center this year to make up for that, or
Yeah.
rather to improve the position. So it's like I don't think Andre James is the fix here. So I would have loved a little bit more investment, but also I look at the weapons they have now, and it's not just the Lad McConkey show anymore, which feels pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, Treyers is a really cool player. I'm excited about that. I keep forgetting they brought back Mike Williams too, so we'll see what he's got left in the tank for them. Um, yeah, look, it's a good. We went back and forth about the golden pick, but it is. I do love that they gave him Herbert weapons, and I do think Omarion Hampton's going to be really good. Similar themes actually in some ways. So I'm going to talk about the Raiders for my final draft message, if you will. This is Chip 2.0, and I think that's worth emphasizing for folks because, NFL fans remember the Chip Kelly experiment and they remember it failing. And I think this draft class drives home how, like, the vision for this offense is going to be a lot closer to what we saw when Chip went back to college. I say this as somebody who absolutely, I mean, a lot of folks watched Ohio State, but watching them specifically for the backs, which was, I did a lot of in this draft, that run game was so fun to watch. Motions, shifts, different formations, different groupings, very diverse run game. Now you give him Ashton Genty, who, like, we no longer have to talk about positional value. He's on the team. You draft a great blocking receiver in Jack Besh. This team is going to live in 2 tight end sets. I'm very, and then you got a quarterback in Geno Smith, who's a massive upgrade for them. I'm getting excited about the vision for this Chip Kelly offense because I just want to, I think this draft class drove home how different it's going to be from what we saw from last time he was in the NFL.
There's a philosophy that I've really come to believe in heavily, and it's that the floor of your run game is set by the offensive line and the ceiling of your run game is set by the running back. Their offensive line is very underrated at this point. Like I said, Andre James is gone. He was the root of the issues as far as them being able to run the ball last year. Obviously, they needed better running backs too, but he was their weak link as far as the blocking is concerned. Now, if you look at the offensive line, they got Colton Miller, JPJ at center, Dylan Parham at right guard, DJ Glaze at right tackle, who I think is going to compete with Charles Grant. And then I think Caleb Rogers is either going to compete at right tackle or just take that left guard spot outright because he's a great athlete. He can play both spots. Like, that's a really, really good offensive line. And then, oh, by the way, they drafted Ashton Genty. So the floor is raised, the ceiling is raised. Besh is a perfect fit. I think Chip Kelly's offense is a perfect fit for all the individual skill sets that they have here. And then quarterback,
yeah,
I can't understate the jump from their quarterback situation last year to their quarterback situation this year. Like, the Raiders are going to score points, like a lot of points. Like, this is going to be probably a top 12 offense in the NFL, 12, 15, if I had to say, which should be enough for them to be like true wild card contenders to me.
It's going to be interesting for Geno because it's so different from what he had in Seattle, which was all about the receivers and the offensive line. The run game was bad, right? And the tight ends were not good. And now you're going to this team that's it's a reverse build in some ways. I'll be interested in seeing how much they lean on him the way Seattle, he had one of the most quarterback-centric offenses. It's like him, Burrow, Dak, you know what I mean? And now this is an offense which would be like great for like a rookie. Like, they're going to run the football, they're going to run it well, and they've got great tight ends. So I'll be interested in seeing if he thrives in it because he's certainly capable of it. Everyone who listens to this knows how high I am on him. I think that was, yeah, I would be excited if I'm a Raiders fan. And just to go back to again, Chip Kelly, this is what I kind of made this about, was I mean, didn't you just love watching that Ohio State run game when you were watching Judkins and Henderson? I was endlessly entertained by watching that particular offense on tape.
It was versatile. It was creative. You could tell like he understood the strengths and weaknesses of his personnel because he called different styles of runs for both these running backs.
And Genty can do both. Genty can do everything. So
Genty can do everything, although except pass protect. That's the one, the
right,
one
right.
thing. Like, you,
Who's his
did
backup?
you watch Travion
Yeah.
Henderson pass protecting and then
Nobody.
Genty pass protecting? Because it's
Yeah, it's a little different. Yeah,
wildly different.
yeah.
But
Mostert
other than
is
that,
RB2 in
yeah,
this offense, which is kind of fun.
yeah.
Okay, you got one more team to highlight. This is a fun one.
My favorite draft out of all 32 teams in the entire NFL was New England, and I know everybody has talked about what they've done at this point. I'm going to do it again. I'm sorry. Like, it's absurd. As far as improving weapons, improving protection, improving pass rush, which were the three things that they struggled with the most. You got Will Campbell and Jared Wilson to solidify the offensive line. Kyle Williams, who is an immediate starter and a dynamic contributor from day one at receiver. Travion Henderson, one of my favorite backs in this class. I had on my grading scale Genty at 81. I had Travion at 80. Like, he was right there for me. Like, he's an incredible football player. And then on defense, Craig Woodson was one of my favorite safeties in this class. He was a top 5 safety in this class for me. They got him in the 4th round. Joshua Farmer, they really needed another nose tackle body type, and they got one again in the 4th round. And then Braden Switson was a top 50 talent in this class, one of the most efficient pass rushers in this class. His pass rush win rate was like right there with Abdul Carter, also played in the SEC, obviously went against some really good players and toasted everybody. They got him in the 5th round because I think there's a stark difference between character concerns and maturity concerns, and I think those are two very different things. He had more maturity concerns than character concerns, but that's why he went in the 5th. And they picked him up there, and he's going to be an immediate contributor to their edge rush rotation. He might be their best one, honestly, besides Keon. So, like, top to bottom, incredible draft. Drake May has better protection and better weapons than he's had in a long, long time, maybe ever, honestly. And then their defense got a lot better as well.
I think what's amazing about, or what's amazing is a little strong, but what I love so much about the New England draft is they went into the draft with, will be honest, I've viewed as desperation, but then none of their draft picks read as desperate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there was such an obvious need to upgrade offensive line and get Drake May another weapon, and that could lead to overdrafting or reaching. And look, we'll see what happens with Campbell. I know that there's some disagreement about whether or not he's truly like a top 4 pick versus, like, I don't know, top 10, 15. But everything they did made sense where they did it. It's not just the players, it's where they got them. It all made sense to me. Yeah, we talked about him like I was a huge fan of this draft. You did mention, I do want to ask you about the Broncos though, because you did mention to me that I don't know, like, what is the message that screw all of every mock draft? Was that their drafting message? Because I didn't see a single mock that had them taking Barron. Did you?
No, and I don't think they even expected it, right?
Yeah.
If anything, the message is, hey, if we can't score 20 points, neither can you, because this defense is disgusting. It's the best secondary they've had since the no-fly zone, and their secondary was already good, right? You got Surtain and Moss outside, Jahdae Barron at nickel, Jaquan McMillan is excellent. They brought in Hufanga, they brought in Greenlaw. They got Savion Jones in the 3rd round, who I thought was one of the better defensive ends in this class. Big, heavy-handed, has some bend. Reminds me of Connor Barwin. Quay Robinson is like the ideal Sam linebacker. You watch him against Armand Membu. He was setting a hard edge against Armand Membu, who went 7th overall, right? Like, this is an amazing class. And then, oh, by the way, they got RJ Harvey to be an immediate contributor in the backfield.
Okay.
And Pat Bryant.
I want to talk about Harvey because this was another, like, I think moment we'll look back on, which is that the Broncos passed on Hampton and they took Barron. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be kind of fascinating. Not just because it was, flew in the face of, I do wonder, by the way, if they would have taken Ibuka, if Emeka Ibuka that was a really surprising pick to the Bucs. And if he was there, I don't know. I'm not sourced. I do wonder if they would have taken him as the pick that I really loved for Denver. But outside of him, Hampton was by far the most mocked guy. And they said, we think we can get our running back talent later. We don't think we can get cornerback talent later, essentially, which candidly I agree with to some degree. Like, the drop off from Jahdae Barron, I believe, to the other corners in this class where they took him was pretty significant. And there's a great value. Nickel is no longer like that is he's going to be on the field. As much as anyone, this gives them incredible. It gives Vance Joseph so much flexibility in terms of like the players, the body types he has. Defense was already top 3 defense, just absolutely sick. But I have noticed some Broncos fans are like a little bit upset that their young quarterback did get. I think they just kind of envisioned him getting help in the first round, and they waited. So what are they getting in RJ Harvey? Who I don't think I talked about him when I talked about offensive players, but it is a player that I watched. I have thoughts on him, but I want to hear yours first.
Super compact build, ultra explosive. When I was at the combine and the NFL very graciously allowed me and my podcast partner EJ to be down on the field during the drills. And so we were like with the players. We had our phone set up literally like 5 feet away from where they were going through bag drills. I have no idea why they let us do it, but they do. And so we got like as up close and personal look at these guys going through drills as you possibly can. And RJ Harvey, even amongst all these NFL players, looked the smoothest with the most burst, the most body control. The only other running back that I thought looked better than him was Amarian Hampton, who was like transcendent. Like he's an insane athlete.
He's got to have like 5 inches on RJ Harvey, right? Like
he's a lot bigger. But RJ, he's like very compact. He's very dense. Like he can take a hit. He's just shorter, but his feet are incredible. Like his jump cuts are explosive. It's like darn near teleportation. He's got legit long speed. Like I love everything about him other than his pass protection. He's one of the worst pass protectors in this class, but that's why we have Audric Estime. So that's fine. Also, he catches the ball pretty well down the field too. I think he's going to get some receiver work. He had like 7 or 8 explosive gains on rail routes this year. Yeah. And who loves throwing rail routes to running backs more than Sean Payton? Like he did that to Alvin every single week. So he's a fit.
He is a fit. I think that's where I would start. It makes sense for this offense in particular. I view him as primarily a zone back. You talked about the pass catching. I think what I would emphasize with him is he put up like video game numbers because he's so explosive, but he's not a finesse back. A lot of the explosive and yards after contact came because he was so wiggly. He's really elusive. He's really good at forcing missed tackles. He's great in a phone booth. The reason why he was not talked about in that upper tier group, despite the numbers, size. It's one thing if you're Ashton Genty and you're made of absolute steel, but when you're 5'9" or however tall he was, you get dinged a bit. And then Sampson paid the same price. We saw Bucky Irving a few years ago. And then, he vision's okay. A little bit of bouncing going on. But as far as like this offense and what's going to be asked of him, it makes a lot of sense to me. So I thought it was a good pick. I thought it made sense. You could definitely feel Sean Payton's fingerprints on this one. I like their class. I mean, I love Johnny Barron. I mean, he's
who doesn't?
Guys, them Broncos fans, he's such an his identity too is just so perfect. Like he's going to get his hands on the football in this defense too. It's going to be awesome.
Have you heard about his backstory, by the way?
No, I don't know anything about his backstory.
So I got to interview him a little bit at the combine, and I had asked him about the shuffle technique that he plays in coverage. And turns out, growing up in Austin, he was trained by Ann Wolfe, who is a legendary boxer. She was a champion in like 3 different weight classes, Hall of Famer. From the time he was in 6th grade, he was training with her. And so he plays corner like a boxer. Like he kind of does this floaty footwork. He relies a lot on peripheral vision. And like he played off coverage 90% of the time at Texas because that's just his style, because he plays like a boxer. And it shows up on tape. You can see it.
I think he's going to help them in run defense as well, by the way, which is something I really liked watching him. So, yeah, I'm excited for that. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm going to be switching, as I said, to a once-a-week schedule, by the way, guys, from this point on in the off-season until we get a little bit closer to the NFL season, doing all kinds of off-season content, rankings, interviews. But if there's anything you want me to do, please let me know. Just on social media, if you're a listener to the show, or in the comments, hit us. This has been really fun. Brett Kollmann there's a few places where folks can check out your work, but the primary one would be the Bootleg Football Show, right?
Yep, we still do an episode every single week, and honestly, off season is our busiest time because we do like a 32 episode sprint over 8 weeks
Ooh,
where we break down the off season for every single team and scheme fits and personnel and financials and everything. So those start up somewhere in June. We take like a week to sleep and then we start on that.
incredible. If you're watching this on YouTube, go subscribe. We're in the YouTube minds together. I hate you. I think when we first switched over to doing this show on YouTube, you guys can check it out, youtube.com/@Mina In the meantime, thank you as always to the folks at Omaha Productions behind the show, Kirsten Sebecki, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor, Jack Foster. I combined two names, Tucker Tashin. And otherwise, I'll be back next week. Bye.